A bitter winter's wind whipped around the lone three bodies standing in the white abyss. Snow blanketed the grounds, the mountains, the houses, and the town well. The wind howled warnings as the ocean tried desperately to crack the chains that kept it trapped. Two little girls buried their heads into their mother's sides as she continued to stare blankly down the well. The cold tickled up her spine, wrapping itself around her heart, tightening at her soul. She felt sure that if she stood there any longer, absolutely everything would freeze. Her blood, her tears, her life. She clenched her teeth and squeezed her daughter's hands tighter, trying to keep alive, trying to keep sane, trying to keep from breaking apart like a block of ice knocked over by a disobedient gust of wind. A rough and terror-soaked voice cut through the woman's dissociated state, but the exact words were held in the whistling wind. Through the fog, she saw an old woman running, as much as she could manage, towards her. "Ellie!" The word found her, and she cringed at the sound. Just puzzling letters all strung together to whisper lies in her ears and pound poison through her veins. A wave of shame shook through Ellie, just another constant reminder of her illness. There were many daily reminders of her illness, but Kieran was a very dedicated husband, keeping a close eye on her behaviors and how she moved around their home and how she spoke to their children. He would often remind her that she's sick or tired or just wrong and she needs time to adjust to her new home and focus on being a good wife and mother. Perhaps he's right, but she can't seem to remember a time when she wasn't fighting to adjust. She can't help but miss their little shack in Ireland. It was small and dingy, and every time she stood inside it, she felt like the bricks were shaking, threatening to fall all around her, and she hated it. She hated the color, the feel, the smell. She hated how she couldn't breathe even when she was sitting completely still. It all felt so wrong. But they had lived right on the edge of the Celtic Sea. Kneeling by the rushing water was the one thing that made her feel truly connected to her body and this land with its dewy green grass and sunlight that pulled gold to the surface of her hair and pink to her cheeks. She spent so many wasted hours by the water, feeling on the brink of uncovering secrets she didn't know she had, and if she listened close enough, she swore she could hear the waves whisper stories across her skin. She would often leave her children and abandon her chores to lean over the endless life source, begging to connect, wishing she could grab hold of its wet fingers, feel it, be a part of it somehow. Kieran grew worried, telling her she was very sick, so he packed up their life and moved them to this desolate land of death where the only water she can feel now is pouring through the taps. Every time she brings that bucket to the well, she can feel every cell in her body begging for something. It builds and builds until it breaks through and suddenly, "Ellie! Ellie!" Mrs. Potts grabbed Ellie roughly. Her throat burned with the effort of shouting over the screaming wind. She searched desperately for life in the young woman's eyes, trapped behind a wall of tears. "Dear, are you all right?" Mrs. Potts began to lead Ellie and her daughters to her little hovel. The young woman shivered beneath her fur cloak, her jaw clenched in defiance against some unknown foe. A small, blonde-haired child with a pointed chin and round green eyes squirmed against her mother's grip. "You were screaming again, Mammy." Bernadette's little pink lips trembled with fear and uncertainty, her fingers loose around her mother's hands, trying to pull away from the crushing grip. Ellie looked blindly down at her daughter, suddenly remembering the girl's existence. She released her daughter's hands and searched around her new surroundings. The never-ending plains of snow and black ice were replaced by a small open room with one couch, an uneven table, a small kitchen corner, and a rickety old woman staring anxiously into her eyes. Mrs. Potts carefully walked Ellie backwards, setting her gently on the discolored couch that smelled faintly of old fish. Ellie sunk silently into the lumpy cushions, staring deep into the unknown, while Mrs. Potts clunked around in the kitchen and the girls settled in at the table. The old woman waddled back out of the kitchen, dropping a plate of biscuits in front of the girls and setting a hot cup of tea gently in Ellie's hands.